It's amazing when we think about the fact that our greatest author in English, and some have argued that he is the best author in any language, that we know so little about him. We actually know almost nothing about him. We know very little about his childhood. We know very little about what he loved or if he traveled. We know very little uh, about him at all. Um, this, of course, has led some to argue that the famous Shakespeare of Stratford is not even the author of the plays. Authors as famous as Mark Twain and actors as famous as Derek Jacobi, um, uh, uh, not Orson Welles, all have said it must be someone else. I myself will tell you that I do not subscribe to the Shakespeare of Stratford as the author, but I'm not going to get into that. If you are interested in that, I can post something about that. They did actually make a film version of the theory that I have ascribed to for a long time, and that's a film called Anonymous. Um, a little disappointed in the film in that it covers every possible theory kind of in one film. I wish they had not tried to cover too much. But in general, it subscribes to a theory that I hold. I love Shakespeare. What is it, though, that makes him important? Because I noticed from the survey that many of you do not like him, or at least find him difficult. And he is difficult, I will say that. He's difficult because first, he's writing 400 years ago. But second of all, he's writing in poetic language. He's writing in iambic pentameter. He's not writing in regular speech. This isn't how people talk. He's writing in poetry. And iambic pentameter means that he's writing in lines that go da 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 da. And you can hear that in some of his most famous lines. To be or not to be, that is the question. Um, and it is part of what makes it memorable. It's part of what makes it easy to memorize. That's part of the goal, even, is to help it to be easy to memorize. But why is he important? Well, there are a number of reasons why. But let me tell you my own personal reason. And this is just my own personal sales pitch, if you will, about Shakespeare. People often ask a question, and I love the question: if you were trapped on a desert island by yourself, and you could only bring one book with you, and that book can't be the Bible, because that's an obvious choice. I would pick the Bible. But you can't have the Bible. What would you bring with you? My answer would be the complete works of Shakespeare. Why? Let me tell you why. First of all, Shakespeare has such an array of characters. One of the things that you've noticed, if any of you like a particular author, is that after you read a few books by that author, you begin to pick up the formula. You begin to realize that the author is really writing the same book over and over again, just changing the names of the characters and maybe the situation slightly, but you begin to recognize a formula. Shakespeare is not like that. His stories do not have a formula, and his characters are each unique. For example, there is no one like Hamlet. There is nobody like Prospero. There is nobody out there like any of the characters who are in A Midsummer Night's Dream. There's no one like Benedict and Beatrice. There are no women like Portia or Juliet, and each of those characters are distinct. Shakespeare is remarkable, and it's part of his genius that every single one of his characters is unique and unlike any of the others. And you can't focus into Shakespeare's formula, because he will surprise you. He will surprise you every single time. Shakespeare's language is rich. As a matter of fact, he uses about 27,000 different words. And this may be part of what makes him challenging, because he's very interested in precision of language. To give you a kind of a sense of that, the entire Bible uses 7,000 total different words, and Shakespeare uses 27,000 different words. And if Shakespeare doesn't have a word for something, well, he'll make it up. He'll make up his own expressions. He doesn't use cliches. He invents his own that become cliches. When we talk about the mind's eye, well, that's an expression that Shakespeare invented. Over and over again, we have words and phrases that he invents because he's not content with the cliches or the old words. And without a doubt, Shakespeare, as the great Harold Bloom has said, may have invented us. What do I mean by that? Well, one of the interesting things about language is that we often do not have the ability to think things unless we have a language to name it. Let me give you an example. We do not have any examples of individuals falling in love in that kind of courtly, smitten sort of way in the ancient world. We don't have an example of someone in Homer or Odysseus or Sophocles or Ovid or Virgil or even Sappho, of someone seeing somebody falling in love for the first sight, and just they will die if they cannot have them, and they will do anything for that individual. That kind of courtly love that's pretty much common fare in any sort of romantic comedy, Hallmark film, summer blockbuster, the kind of love that we associate with high school and college. That kind of love doesn't seem to exist, and it's made some people wonder if that kind of love didn't exist because there was not a language for it. But all of a sudden, in about the 12th century AD, about the 1100s, a group of men that we refer to as troubadours began to appear on the scene. Now, these were musicians who would come often with their lutes, and they would come into town, and they would sing songs, romantic songs of knights falling desperately in love with ladies. And they would do anything for them, that even if they couldn't have them in marriage, they would then still do anything for them in a non-sexual way, just to delight them. All of a sudden, because these songs appear, you find people falling in love in that way. And it's made some people wonder, did the troubadours invent modern love? Or was this kind of love already around, and the troubadours just happened to finally notice it and put it into song? No one's really sure. It could be a little bit of both, but it's kind of a chicken and the egg argument. Much of the way we view ourselves, much of the way we view love, much of the way we view our relationships with men and women, we get not just from life, but from Shakespeare in his plays. So this has led some people to say that Shakespeare has invented us, that Shakespeare's plays have showed us how to behave, how to act. I don't know, that may be a little strong. I love Shakespeare. I'm not ready to give him that much credit, but I do see how his plays are not only beautiful poetry, not only delightful stories, and he is a master of comedy, but he's also a master of tragedy. But not only that, that he may have had an influence over the way we view ourselves. Perhaps one of Shakespeare's greatest inventions is on the stage. He has characters who begin to talk to themselves and think out loud. Now, certainly Shakespeare is not inventing the idea of thinking to yourself, talking to yourself, but Shakespeare does seem to be the first writer to be aware of the fact that we talk to ourselves and change in the process. Harold Bloom will call it the art of self-seeing. I like that term. And we see that happen in his plays over and over again. I don't know, that might be taking it a little too far. Shakespeare is also a master of the pun. Now, this isn't the kind of pun that makes you groan. He will have a pun in almost every line, but he just rattles them by so fast we don't always realize that there is a pun. He doesn't pun in the way my dad used to pun. My dad, like many punsters, would pun in a way to make sure you know that he made a pun. So, for example, in Romeo and Juliet, there's that wonderful moment when Mercutio, Romeo's friend, gets into a fight, a sword fight, and gets stabbed. And Romeo talks to him and says, Mercutio, are you okay? Are you okay? And Mercutio says, not intending to be funny at all, he says, in all seriousness, he says, look to me tomorrow, and you will find me a grave man. Well, that's a pun. It's a pun. I mean, you look to me tomorrow, and you will find me in a very grave condition. And look to me tomorrow, and you will find me a grave man, a dead man. Well, Shakespeare will rattle this over and over and over again. It's a kind of wit that requires an incredible intellect. And it also gives us enjoyment. Now, Shakespeare's play, A Midsummer Night's Dream, one of only two original plays or stories, is going to be making a great deal of fun at mythology. It's going to open with the king, Theseus, one of the great Greek heroes, who has just conquered the Amazons and now will marry the queen of the Amazons. And notice how Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons, doesn't seem as excited about the marriage as Theseus does. And so we have this marriage taking place. But in the meantime, there is problems in the marriage of the king of the fairies, Oberon, and the queen of the fairies, Titania. And we also have something odd. We have two lovers, and we have somebody who is in love with another one, but this one is in love with the girl, and oh, it's so confusing. And they're all going to go into the woods. Because you see, in English mythology, the woods are magical. They're full of fairies, they're full of gnomes, they're full of magical events. If you've ever seen the play or the film Into the Woods by Stephen Sondheim, the reason why he has them go into the woods is because that's where magic happens. And so it's going to be a convergence of all these stories into the woods. We're going to have a convergence of Greek myths, Roman myths, Celtic myths, English myths, and they're all going to get mixed up in this delicious hodgepodge. And there we're going to meet perhaps one of Shakespeare's most delicious characters, Puck, otherwise known as Robin Goodfellow. Now, he is indeed a fairy, a sprite, and he is rather mischievous, as English fairies are. English fairies are known for spoiling the milk and spoiling the meat. They love to make mischief. They love to steal things. If something goes missing, it was a fairy that probably did it. When Larry the Cucumber sings, "Oh, where is my hairbrush?" The English would have said a fairy took it. Today, we might say, why can't I find the left sock? I only can find my right sock. They would have said, well, a fairy must have taken the other one. So he's going to mix all of these things. But this is clearly a play about marriage. This is a play that's clearly meant to be an entertainment, intended perhaps for a marriage feast, likely for a marriage feast. And you don't want a downer play for a marriage feast. And so not only will everybody get along in the end, everybody's going to get married, everyone will be happy, and everyone will live happily ever after. And Shakespeare, I believe himself, will appear at the end of the play through the voice of Puck. And he says, if these shadows have offended, then just know this much, that we meant well. We meant well. I hope you're enjoying the play. If you have not had a chance to see it, please watch it. If you have not had a chance to read it, you'll get more of the wordplay and such. There's so many different versions of it. I've given you the link to one that will cost you $4, but there are also 4 or 5 free versions on YouTube and a couple free versions on Netflix and on Amazon. Not as good as this one, but I hope you're going to enjoy it. I do have a question for you based on the play. It's going to assume that you've seen the play, but I want you to know that Shakespeare is worth reading. It used to be once upon a time all educated people read Shakespeare, and I believe that there is value in it. If you haven't read Shakespeare, and it seems from the survey most of you have not, Shakespeare's read you, and he knows you in some ways maybe better than you know yourself. So if you want to learn often about yourself, one good way to start is to read some Shakespeare. All right, I look forward to your comment below.